Hello, Hello, LinkedIn, and welcome to Business Unusual, a live show that focuses on how coronavirus is impacting how we all work. I'm your host, Joe Millord, a news editor at LinkedIn. Over a month and a half after the global pandemic prompted a wave of social distancing measures and stay-at-home orders, a number of states have begun to loosen restrictions. In Georgia, hair and nail salons are among the businesses that have been allowed to reopen their doors. In Texas, on Friday, restaurants and non-essential retail stores were allowed to open, but operating at 25% capacity. In Florida, today, a similar loosening of measures has begun. But that doesn't mean that everyone can or will be able to go back to work. Today, we have three frontline workers joining us to tell us about their experiences within that context. We have Adepeju Adefi joining us from Atlanta, Carlos Laredo joining us from Austin, and Matt Bill joining us in Fort Lauderdale. Guys, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Adepeju, I want to start with you because I know that you have family members who work around the airport just as yourself. I want to first know what was your own reaction to Governor Brian Kemp loosening, and also what was the reaction of your family members? How were they feeling about the prospect of going back to work?
Honestly, my entire family was shocked. It came out of nowhere. If you asked, I would believe most people, it came as a shock. Even the mayor of Atlanta, she was shocked. He hadn't consorted with any mayors of any cities. And the data that he was shown, well, actually, he didn't present any data in regards to the declining of both deaths and new infection rates, but he kept saying he had talked to experts. And my entire family felt unprepared for when he said new businesses were going to be opening, because the businesses that he included in that list were all businesses where hands-on work was required, except for bowling alleys. That was like the only business that he said that could open that didn't require employees and customers to be touching. But barbershops, tattoo parlors, nail salons, all those, it absolutely floored all of us.
Right. And I know that obviously, like we said, you're in Atlanta, and there's a big difference between dense and populous areas like Atlanta and maybe rural areas in different states. Could you tell us what the sense is around Atlanta specifically, not talking about Georgia, and how people are feeling there, or whether there is an expectation that maybe right now is not the right time to reopen, but there's anticipation that maybe in a few weeks they will be. Is there any sense that people would be ready in the future?
Well, from what I had seen and what I had heard, still a lot of the businesses that were allowed to open didn't open. Not because they didn't want to go back to work, but they felt it was too early, but also they didn't have the equipment that they needed. The governor said that he was putting in strict guidelines in terms of what PPE companies needed to have. But I even went to the governor's website. I went to the website where they were saying which businesses could open and what guidelines, but there were no instructions as far as where these companies could go get the equipment that they needed. And it just, so, I mean, even movie theaters around here are still shut down. They were allowed to reopen. A lot of restaurants still don't allow sit-down customers. A lot of nail salons around me are still closed because not only were they unprepared in terms of his announcements, but they're also unprepared in terms of the equipment that they need. You know, as you know, around the country, hospitals are battling to get the resources that they need. So if they can't get what they need, how are these smaller businesses supposed to compete? Although I did notice that more people were going out to go get food, to go get supplies. But as far as business as normal, most businesses still aren't operating. Today, they're allowing malls to reopen, but still there are no guidelines in terms of how are these businesses supposed to enforce, you know, reduced capacity and everything, especially when they're being overrun by customers who have been stuck in their house for weeks and who, quite frankly, don't care about social distancing anymore. It astounds me when I go out and I see people still so close together in different clusters. And it's like this thing never happened. And it's scary because the number of newly infected people keep going up and up and up, as well as the death rate. So
Right. And just to remind our audience that's joining us right now, you're watching Business Unusual, and we'd love to hear comments from you. Thank you for David from Orlando for joining. Thank you to Jamie for tuning in as well. Carlos, I want to turn to you because you also work in the restaurant industry. And I just have a simple question for you. We know that businesses in Texas are allowed to operate at 25%, but what would it make you feel to have you specifically feel comfortable going back to work?
Well, I'm not comfortable going back to work. Actually, luckily enough, the Cheesecake Factory is not open right now. As of right now, we're waiting. We're waiting until we're available to make sure that the guests and the employees are 100% safe. I mean, it's just working at 25 capacity is just not feasible for a restaurant to be able to operate with more staff. It's just not. I mean, you can't run a business like that. I mean, you can be shut down for a month, but I mean, if you're only running 25% for a couple of months, if this doesn't get past phase 2, then I mean, don't make money.
Right, and I actually wanted to ask you about that specific dynamic because we've seen a couple of restaurant workers on LinkedIn commenting about their doubts of how their restaurant would be able to operate at a limited capacity, especially when you consider that so many people in the service industry generate income from tips. Can you explain in detail why those doubts exist?
Well, again, I mean, people are going to be out eating, but I mean, again, we're at 25 capacity. We're just not going to get the flow that we used to get when we were running 100%. So, I mean, we're going to have less staff. We're going to have fewer people walking in through the doors. So, I mean, being able to survive on 25%, making money, tips, because we work off of tips. We get $2.13 an hour here in Texas. We can't live off of that. On top of that, that would go back into unemployment, where if we were on unemployment, that would take unemployment away as well.
Right. And Matt, you're in Fort Lauderdale, and as I said at the top of the show, today is when we've seen some loosening of restrictions for businesses. What has the communication been like for you, for some of your peers? Has there been any type of timetable to signal when someone who works for a non-essential retail business like yourself, has there been any clarity around when you guys could be going back to work? And we're not catching Matt's audio there. We'll try again. Matt, I was asking before, has there been any clarity in communication for when you could be going back to work? All right, we seem to be losing Matt here, so we'll try again. But Adepeju, I wanted to go back to you because I had a question in mind specifically related to family and how family impacts decisions to go back to work or how people are feeling about going back to work. And we know you have children, so what would happen if you got into a situation where you are returning to work, but also the orders for children to stay home from school is going on at the same time? Would that be a situation that's difficult to deal with?
Fortunately for me, that's not too much of a situation. Actually, they've canceled school for the rest of the year. So even if I wasn't at home, my kids are old enough that I can put some things into place, and my family is close enough that I could put some things into place to make sure that their school work got done until the end of the year. The unfortunate thing about that is more than likely my parents, I have older parents, I wouldn't be able to go visit them. I have a mom that's 69, a dad that's 78, and even going to the grocery store now fills me with a lot of fear because so many businesses are opening back up. They don't have the personal protection, or they have the bare minimum personal protection. And so, because it's no longer contained as to where we can go, what we can do, who we can interact with, now you have more people who have come into contact with more things. and there's really nothing we can do about it. But fortunately, also the school year is almost coming to a close. We have about 3 more weeks. The county, to the credit of the county that I live in Clayton County, they are being very proactive in trying to help parents help their kids, because I mean, they got thrown into it. Teachers got thrown into it just as quickly as we as the parents did. They are doing their best to try to get things as much on track as they humanly can. But it's a lot of people aren't in my situation. I know a lot of people, when they found out that their schools were closing for the rest of the year, they freaked out because they have small children. So if they're allowed to go back to work, but childcare centers still aren't open for them, what are they supposed to do with their kids while they're at work? I mean, it's a really sticky situation. I think a lot of things haven't been thought out, and I think a lot of situations haven't been taken into consideration, because as far as I know, childcare centers still aren't allowed to open in Georgia, as far as I'm aware of. So it's pretty dire for some people.
Okay. The factors surrounding people's decisions going back to work, how these factors actually exist. Carlos, I want to go to you now, because I know that you keep in contact with some of your peers, and we're getting some comments from people who do want to get back to work as soon as possible. Thank you guys for tuning in. And so I wanted to ask, I know that you might be able to say you might not be ready to go back to work right now, but is there a certain time period, or is there a certain number of weeks or months that you might lose your patience with waiting, or might not think that it's feasible to keep on staying away from work? Is there any time that plays a factor in your attitude towards returning to work?
I mean, I wish I could say it would be in a couple of weeks, but right now, I mean, I don't feel safe. Even going to the grocery store, I don't feel safe. But that's just me. Everybody has different. I mean, but then I see cases just like yesterday. I mean, I saw from the Kerrville Daily Times, I think the number of cases were 1,026. That's what they reported. It's just, I feel like restaurants shouldn't have been part of phase 1. And they should have been part of phase 2. I mean, there's just so many variables in restaurants where you can't control every single aspect of it being clean, as in to where guests touch where they sit, silverware, where they're eating, they're touching their face. It's just one of those things. I mean, we can be in the restaurant industry, we can be as careful as possible, but we get guests that are going to walk in that are not on the same level as we are as being safe. So how do we take that leap of faith, making sure that they are doing what I wish that they would be doing in order for me to be safe, in order for me to go back to work? That's how I feel. I feel safe, me working with my coworkers. I know they would do a good job, but the people that are going to come into our restaurant, that's what my major concern is. It's again, just a leap of faith, hoping that they're doing what is necessary.
Right. And we had some comments from members who were talking about their own situations, saying that, they're ready to go back to work. We have one commenter, Amanda, who said that she's comfortable going back to work simply because she has bills to pay. We have Elise, who points out that going back to work, is not only a conversation about getting money from the job, but also people who may be living alone and struggling with mental health or anxiety. We've heard actually a lot of that from multiple members. And we have heard from Eric, who says that he's ready to go back to work because of the same basic reason. He needs the money. And at the same time, he's worried about possibly coming homesick and infecting his family. I want to go for one last question to you, Matt. And we see how family and living situations affects how people feel about this issue. Are there any factors outside of your job itself that affects how you feel about the possibility of going back to work in the next few weeks? Okay, we've lost Matt again there. Sorry about that. Pedro, could you chime in here on that same question as well? Are there any factors that have impacted how much how eager you do or do not feel about going back to work outside of the job itself?
As far as it comes to my creditors, I've actually gotten letters or emails or text messages or whatever from almost every creditor that I have. They're willing to work with you. I mean, I see commercials all the time about creditors that are willing to work with people. I know everybody isn't in the same situation where, um, you might have a landlord that's being very belligerent about this, but for the most part, if you talk to your creditors ahead of time before you think you might be in trouble, they are willing to work with you. I think that that's a lot of that's a factor most people don't take into account. I had some of my creditors that automatically, without me even asking or saying something, they reduced my bill. My internet company reduced my bill by $100 for a couple of months. My insurance company gave me a little bit of a refund back. My electric company even reduced the amount because they know everybody's stuck in the house, so electricity bills are going to go up. My personal advice to people, if you are in a bind, please talk to your creditor. They are a lot more willing to help you than you may realize. I think a lot of people feel stuck because they feel like, oh, if I miss a couple of my bills, they're just going to shut everything off. That may not necessarily be true. Talk to them. They're human just like you. Most of them have families just like you. And a lot of them are willing to understand because this isn't an isolated incident. This is a global incident.
That's some good advice to end on right there. We just have to say to all three of you, thanks for joining us on this panel today. We appreciate you sharing your experiences with us. We'll see you next time. All right. Now, it's important to remember states are reopening in phases because they've made the determination that it's not yet safe to operate as if business is as usual. The hopes of getting to that point rest largely on the development of a vaccine. And our next guest is someone who's been talking about this subject for the past few weeks. She's the host of a new live show on LinkedIn, The Road to the Vaccine, broadcast in collaboration with Johnson & Johnson. Thanks for joining us, Lisa Ling.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
All right, so Lisa, I think we could just start off with a basic question. What are the types of questions that you've had as you've sat down with experts over the past few weeks for your show?
Well, the reason why I'm so happy to be able to even host this show is because right now we are experiencing something so unprecedented, and everyone has questions. I was just listening to you talk to your guest just now, the frontline workers, and everybody is so eager to know when they can go back to work. When is it safe? And so for me, those are some of my most burning questions. What does it take to develop a vaccine? Will the safety of it be compromised because this vaccine is being produced faster than any vaccine has ever been produced before? And ultimately, when will it become available? Because the idea of returning to any sense of normalcy, I mean, life as we knew it, even 3 months ago, is almost irrelevant. The idea of going to watch any sports games or going to concerts right now is impossible because the risk is too severe. And so until a vaccine is developed, until our culture can reach some kind of herd immunity, and the best way to do that is through a vaccine, we're just going to have to adapt to what the guidelines are. And as you know, they are changing pretty rapidly. And there also isn't a consistency in how states are operating. So there's still so many unanswered questions.
Right. And you mentioned before that there is an attempt to have a vaccine developed faster than we've ever had before. Have you gotten a sense from the experts of why there is optimism that can even be achieved in the timelines that we're hearing between 1 to 2 years?
Well, the technology has increased exponentially. And what I have learned through this process is, and I've been learning about J&J's vaccine candidate specifically, is they're taking a platform that has already been used for other diseases and viruses. So it has already been used in clinical trials, so they're pretty certain it's safe. And so they've kind of gotten a head start in that area. And so that's one of the reasons why they feel confident that they can develop a vaccine in an expedited timeline. But of course, it's still it's going to require a lot to even get it into clinical trials and then to get FDA approval. So that is the hope, that a vaccine can be developed by the beginning of next year. But at this point, no one really knows.
And on the flip side, have you heard any reasons for pessimism among those who are working on this very important issue?
So far, Joe, I've been asking because I know that as a culture, we are so eager to want to know. But based on the conversations that I've had with scientists, they're feeling very optimistic. They are working around the clock. A number of people who are working on this vaccine worked on the Ebola vaccine, and they spent years working tirelessly. And we're just starting to kind of come off of that pressure and now have just jumped full force into trying to develop this vaccine for COVID-19. But despite that, they are all eager and very optimistic about their vaccine candidate.
And we know that you're going live tomorrow with another episode of your show. I'd like to know, what's the focus of this upcoming edition?
Well, like every episode, we have a segment called Vaccine 101, where we talk about what it takes to develop a vaccine. But I'm also very excited to be talking to a frontline doctor who actually survived Ebola herself. She's a physician from Nigeria, but she's been working in New Orleans. And so she is going to be talking about what it was like to experience and go through Ebola and why she's so passionate about trying to treat patients with COVID. And also, I'm going to be interviewing two doctors who were previously working in labs, and they took leaves of absence to go to the front lines to work to treat COVID patients. And they are working in one of the busiest hospitals in the country. So that's been, for me, really exciting about the opportunity to host this series. I mean, I get so excited for Tuesday to arrive because I get this chance to interview the foremost experts in science and health who are literally on the front lines trying to fight this virus.
Right. And we all know that we're going to be watching them closely as they work on finding a solution really for everyone to be able to get back to as close to normal as possible. Lisa, I have to thank you once again for joining us today. And I have to also thank the audience that came in to tune into this episode of Business Unusual. Please leave your comments and questions. We'll do our best to get to them. And let us know what you'd like to hear from us about next time. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time.